Right, okay.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching. I am Nasanka from Coaching with Nasanka. I help parents who co-parent with narcissistic partners or ex-partners, and I've got a special guest today, Lisa here. Lisa and I connected via when I did a talk at London Empathy Conference, and we absolutely enjoyed each other's contributions there. So I connected you via LinkedIn, didn't I? And then we've just been building our relationship ever since. And Lisa's doing something incredible, so generous, and so committed to actually supporting children. But without me saying too much, I'm going to pass the platform to you, Lisa, so you can introduce yourself and tell what you do. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. And we do share, I feel, the same passion of supporting children that have been impacted by trauma, and also supporting the adults around them, whether you're a foster carer or a parent. We're here. Our main goal is to try and support you with, building up your confidence, and helping you through this, the trauma that you've experienced. Now, my main role, I work with foster carers and I work within schools as well, supporting children that have had trauma, and starting that healing journey. Because for a lot of children, I found that they blamed themselves a lot of the time. They felt that it might be their behaviour, the way that they are, that's caused arguments and caused disruption in the family home. And we know that's not to be true. But as adults, we tend to want to make children feel better, and we want to be fixers. And to help children move forward from that trauma and process the feelings, the most powerful thing you can do is to support them with the connection. Having a safe, attuned adult that really is trying to step into their shoes and build their confidence of knowing that adults can be safe. And I've got a quote that I want to read to you,
Okay.
which is about trauma, and it's by a professor called Bruce Perry, and he works with helping children recover from trauma. And his quote is, "What makes children get better from a trauma is connection to other human beings. These kind of interactions end up being much more therapeutic and healing than many of the other things that we try to do with kids." And that for me is so powerful, because when you first start helping a child to heal, the most important thing that you can do is provide safety in that relationship. So
Yeah.
looking at how you can make a child feel safe in your care. So
Yeah.
being predictable, being consistent, showing up with kindness. And sometimes, like, a lot of the carers will say to me, like, when
Lisa, can I just interrupt you
yeah, of
for a
course you
second?
can.
Because
Sorry,
I've
I
just,
could just talk and talk.
I know you're very passionate and you can carry on so that our viewers can actually sort of tune into what we're just about to do. So today's topic is, how do you connect with children so that you can, as the adult, support children's well-being, and then through their process, through their trauma. That's the topic. So you've introduced your role, and you work with the schools, you work with the foster carers, you work with children who've been through some terrible trauma. I think it's important that we start with what trauma is, because I don't think many people have a good understanding of what trauma is. When we hear the word trauma, often people go into thinking or sexual abuse or physical abuse, and we often think, oh, we've not had any of that. Um, by the way, I have, and I've recovered from it as well. But the point is, we often think about the biggest traumas that is ever there, like we see in newspapers, on news, the war and etc. But can we discuss what trauma actually is, and how we respond as a human being to a trauma?
I think trauma is individual for everybody. We've all had life circumstances where, and everybody's so individual that it affects people different. There's one-off traumas where, you know, you could have had a car crash or a bereavement and lost somebody, and everybody responds very differently. But the children that I work with have experienced developmental trauma. So it's trauma from when they're in their early years, when they're building up attachments with caregivers and they've not had them safe and attuned adults, and they've experienced different kinds of abuse. Now, there's a really, really good book that I would really highly recommend, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. You're smiling. Have you read this book?
Yes, I think so.
This book is amazing for explaining how trauma stores in every cell of your body, and it's individual to everybody. So what could be in a traumatic experience for me may not be for you. You know, we're all so differently, and for the time it takes to recover as well is so differently for the individual. But for children, what happens is when there is a significant trauma, there's different parts of your brain. Now, the primitive part of your brain, which is your brainstem, that controls like your fear responses, your survival. And when you've had a traumatic experience, that registers as you're in your fight, flight and freeze. And the top part of your brain, which is your prefrontal cortex, which is all your thinking and your learning, that can shut off. If a child's in survival, they could be in the safest environment. You could be thinking as an adult, right, I'm providing safety, you know, I'm giving consistent care, you know, I'm making this child feel safe. But if they're still in that part of their brain where they're on high alert because they've had unpredictable adults, they've had dangerous situations, that takes time to be able to shift so that they can get that thinking part of the brain back online. And we do that by creating safety in the relationships. Safety is in that you are a present adult for that child, that you're not going to behave unpredictably. You know, you're going to give them predictable responses, and that's what's going to help heal that trauma.
Absolutely. Oh, that's wonderful information. And you've mentioned about our bodies going into fight, flight, freeze, and there's another response as well. That's the fawn response. So children end up becoming the people's pleasers, you know, saying yes to everything and become so vulnerable and to danger. So, and
I
you,
agree. I think they're all like defense mechanisms as well. And you can see it almost as an iceberg. So you might see children's behaviours as being people pleasing, you might see rudeness, you might see defiance, you might see children running off. But these outward behaviours always have a root cause. And from experience, the root cause is mainly anxiety and fear. And that's from trauma. That takes time. Definitely takes time for that to move and to shift.
Absolutely.
And there's lots of ways that we can help children move out of the fight, flight and freeze.
I just want to add something to it. I think it's important. So that's the theory part of it, and you mentioned some of the practical aspects. You know how children manifest these trauma response. You know, some children withdraw, some children become very aggressive, some children get into fighting, some children lose their focus and attention at school, they lose their grades, they don't want to, well, we interpret it as they don't want to listen. So there is this there is a culture of blame shifting towards the children who are the most vulnerable, who also come to this world with a lot of innate wisdom and who then go through this traumatic experience, and then they start conditioning themselves, and we start conditioning children right from a start. So there is this crazy culture of us trying to blame shift towards the children. You're not behaving well, you're doing this wrong, we're constantly in that state of correcting our children. We have got into this habit, conditioned habit ourselves, because that's what's happened to us, of correcting children.
Yeah,
For
and
example, I can
agree.
I can share an example so that the people actually understand what actually this means. So I still occasionally work with children, and I was at a playground one day, and I could just see from a distance this child who's got additional needs, was really trying to, like, it looked like that child was trying to hit another child or other children. I just knew immediately this was a very protective behavior, because this child is so scared of being picked on by
Yeah.
the other children. But what some people see is this child misbehaving, right? That's not
Don't
what's
see it as a
happening.
survival response.
This is a survival response of this child knowing that some certain behaviors happened from these children in the past that hurt the child emotionally. And now this child, as these children approach closer to him with the good intention of playing, because I was watching them, but this child is responding because this child is in the fight mode. I'm not going to let myself get hurt again. These children have bullied me in the past, So, but what we do usually when we don't become aware of these trauma responses, we will
Going with, yeah,
intervene.
correct.
We will intervene
Yeah.
and we will tell, kicking is not kind, hurting other children is not kind. All that child is doing is to protect. So, what that child is walking away in that moment is not being listened, not being
Feeling bad.
seen,
Mm.
feeling bad about themselves, and victimized, and possible re-traumatized.
I agree.
Re-traumatized.
I agree.
And
And
with these negative beliefs about themselves, something is wrong with me.
I
Go
so
on.
I so agree with that. And I think we really, really have got to try and work on connection before correction. So
Yes.
in that example there, if they got an adult that was with them that bent down to them and said, I can see that you're frightened.
Yeah.
I can see that this, hitting out, kicking is because your brain and your body's letting you know that you're scared.
Yeah.
That helps the child realize then and understand why they're reacting the way they are, because a lot of children don't know why they react the way they do, that it is a defense mechanism. But having a calm adult that's present that actually, do you know what, just says to them, I can
Yeah.
see you're frightened, I'm
Yeah.
here and I'm going to help you with this.
Yeah.
Their defense mechanisms will come straight back down. And you're right, if you've got an adult who said, right, you shouldn't be kicking, you shouldn't be hitting, what's going to happen is you're going to meet fire with fire. Their
Yes.
behavior will go up,
Yeah.
they'll lose control, it'll get even worse.
Yeah.
If you've got that empathic, compassionate response, but the only way you can do that as an adult is if you're in that space first.
Yeah.
So if you see that situation, and that situation makes you feel anxious, you are not going to be able to help that child come down and co-regulate.
Yeah.
If you're able to take a step back and think, right, how can I manage this with kindness
Yeah.
and understanding, you will respond much better. And that's easier said than done. When you've got
Yes.
children kicking off and, it is hard, it will trigger you. You might
Oh,
think, oh my God,
absolutely.
where do I start?
Yeah.
But, obviously you can't let children attack each other. Yeah, you have got to move them away. You've got to intervene. But once you've dealt with that situation, that's when you can get that connection in and say, you really look scared then. I could see
Yeah.
how much you were struggling. I know you've got a good heart. I could see how frightened you was for you to be kicking. And it will make that child feel like they're not a bad person. And I always think I'm a big believer on focusing on children's strengths as well, what you can see good about them, because for a lot of children that have had trauma, their inner working model, their inner working beliefs in themselves are that there's a fault. They go
Yeah.
into shame, thinking
Yes.
that something has happened. A lot of the children that I go and see in the foster placements believe that they're at fault. There's something about them, that's why they're not wanted. And that takes time to work through. But it's, if I said to them, no, it's not your fault, you've done nothing wrong, would that make them believe it? No, it wouldn't make them believe it. It would, by looking at their strengths, focusing on what they're really talking about and how they're feeling, and attuning to that, you know, that must feel awful to feel like that, you know, and start to use that wondering and curiosity to why they feel like that. That helps shift children.
Absolutely. I mean, you've picked up on a really, you mentioned several golden nuggets there, but I'm going to pick up on one thing. Shame is a real big significant aspect of trauma. So when we've been through traumatic experiences in our life, what we internalize is the shame that something is wrong with me, that I'm not wanted, I am trouble, I am not good enough. So these core beliefs, and that shame and this shame manifests in so many different ways amongst children as they grow into adults. Relationship troubles, lack of focus and attention, and therefore, lack of achievements and not having a growth mindset, because when our bodies have been in traumatic survival state for a long time, when you live with shame, that's what happens. Your bodies go into that survival mode, and it lives there with a lot of toxic chemicals flooded. It affects the neural connections in your brain. That means your brain doesn't grow, which is why we call it developmental trauma. Brains don't grow. So we see these adults going into addictive behaviors later in life, unhealthy coping mechanisms, toxic relationships. Either you cause pain to someone else, or you end up being the victim of somebody else's toxic behavior towards you, abusive behavior towards you. So we kind of end up, continuing these cycles. So the best place to intervene is when the children are younger, when they've experienced that trauma. Like Gabor Mate says, it's not what happens to you, it's being alone with that pain.
I agree. There's a brilliant researcher, and she's called Brené Brown, and you can watch her videos on YouTube. And she talks about shame, and she said that shame cannot survive if it's not silenced. So if people have got the opportunity to have somebody who's willing to sit with them difficult feelings, you won't know how it exactly feels for that person, but just being able to say to them, I'm here, I'm with you, and I care. That then gives a window of opportunity for any child or an adult to talk about how it's felt for them to be them, because you're not being judgmental, you're not offering advice, you're just willing to listen. And I love her work. I think she's amazing. And I think, she'll say that, she says, oh, I research shame. She says a lot of people will be like, whoa, they don't want to go there, because everybody has had shame, I feel.
And we continue to live with shame. And most of us have dealt with some of our shame when you worked with trauma, and when you've processed trauma, when you've learned to accept and sit with that trauma, and then the intense feelings that comes with it. And at the same time, we also have undealt shame within us. So I don't think there is a single person in this planet who doesn't live with shame. So it's a common experience for all of us. Some of us have more shame than the others. Some of us are aware of the kind of shame that we live with. And coming back to your point of adults' ability to being in present, and this shame affects that. So if you're that adult who live in the shame, who live in the anxiety, who's not necessarily processed your own experiences and beliefs from the past, then you're likely to be triggered, and you're likely to avoid being with this child who is also
Yeah.
going through this pain. And I can give you a very personal example from my own life. When I had my daughter, I hadn't dealt with any of the experiences I'd experienced in the past. So I've experienced physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, all sorts of things. I mean, I'm like a cocktail of cocktail of trauma, you know, and I can talk about it with a smile because I have processed them, you know. And sometimes humor is important when you talk
It's
about
so
these things.
important, so
And it's not
important.
because I'm disrespectful of trauma. I am using a lot of humor, especially when I talk about myself, because I think it's important that we can look at this, they have a chuckle and appreciate how far I have come. So going back to the story, is when my daughter was born and she started crying, I found it extremely difficult to be present and calm her. So I could not, when she was a baby, co-regulate with the. I was there, I was trying to feed her, I was going through the motion, I was doing all the right things, the checklist, the cognitive
Yeah.
approaches, you know, I've
Was she
trained speech,
anxious?
act, you know, everything.
Anxious.
But whenever she cried, I just could not deal with it. And I struggle, and that's what obviously developed into postnatal depression, depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and all sorts of things that then, thank God, you know, I've started healing,
Working through.
right? Improve. And it is when these moments happen that we've got to pause and ask and reflect ourselves. Actually, I'm struggling to have this conversation with my child, or I'm struggling to be present with this child. What is it that telling about me? What part of my life that I haven't accepted and processed? You know, we tend to avoid, or we tend to shut them down. You know,
I
enough,
agree.
enough,
And
enough with it.
that's such good self-awareness, because a lot of
Yeah.
people don't realize that's what's happening. They
Mm.
actually start to go into shame as a
Yeah.
parent, because they start to
Yeah.
think, what's wrong with me? Why can I not comfort my
Yeah.
child? Why am I feeling this in my body? Because that's where you feel it. You
Yeah.
feel it in your body. You feel tight, you feel
Yeah.
tense, you feel unable to cope in them situations. And that's why it's so important, like you're right, recognizing that there's
Yeah.
areas that you've not processed, but also learning emotional regulation skills yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can do this through learning about your senses. We're all individual. What helps us through our five senses to feel calmer. And you can do this with children as well.
Yeah.
And it's looking at, what smells ground you, what tastes ground you, what do you find comforting,
Yeah.
what sounds help to calm your nervous system, because we are every day in our environment, we've got sounds coming at us, noise, things happening. Your nervous system is interpreting all of these
Yeah.
senses every day. And when you heard your baby cry, that was a trigger,
Yeah.
right?
And it
And
happened in the body, and it
it,
happened in the
it does
body.
happen in the
That's
body.
why the rational mind couldn't interpret, and we go into accusing ourselves of, or internalizing the blame towards ourselves. So, what's wrong with me? What can't I do this? You know, we
Yeah.
rationalize this, but it's important that people remember trauma is in your body, it's not in your mind.
No, it's not. And it,
So,
it triggered your primitive brain, your survival brain
yeah,
kicked in thinking,
yeah,
oh, my baby's crying,
yeah,
and you felt it in your body. Now,
yeah,
hopefully, I'm hoping, if nothing else, if people take away from this talk that when they do feel it in the body, because trauma is stored there, having an awareness and
yeah,
feeling like my body feels different, my shoulders are tighter, I can feel it in my face,
yeah,
just starting to have that awareness and learn with your senses how to start grounding yourself,
yeah,
even as simple as starting to take deep breaths, clenching
yeah,
your body up and releasing,
yeah,
will help to start calming that nervous system down. They said when you've had trauma, and for children as well, you breathe differently. So your breath is more shallow.
yeah,
You can't take the deep breaths that your nervous system needs to start calming that system down. And practicing this with children makes such a difference. Even like at the end of the day, when you sat it's, you know, a relaxing time, getting him to bed, having that time where you're taking some deep breaths, you're doing your star breathing on your hand, sitting with your child will help you learn to be more present.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think with that, you brought us into a really good sort of point in our discussion. So I'm going to share a few sort of regulating techniques that you can do very easily with your children. So if I'll what you can do normally when children are okay, when they're not triggered, when they're not in that fight or flight zone, there are so many things that you can do. So a lot of sensory experiences, walk in nature, dancing, so you kind of get the movement
Rhythm.
going,
Yeah.
get the rhythm going, and also that's when you can have a better conversation, so you can relate, you can have that because they're not in the fight or flight response and their prefrontal cortex is functioning, the driver's seat
Yeah,
is
you're right.
on, you can have. So you need to
Regulation
have
first. Yeah.
it works first. So you can have those conversations. So arrange some time in your diary to have these moments as a must. We are all very busy people. We're all very busy people. We run around. We're also in this like running and doing mode all the time. It's very easy to forget. And if you are not at that stage of self-awareness that you are tuning in, I'd say squeeze in 15 minutes with your children where you are fully present,
And
because
it's
that
something
gives
that's joyful. Sorry to interrupt you, but
joyful. Yeah.
you can't experience fear if you enjoy. And I think for a lot of adults as well, because we've got such busy lives,
Yeah.
you forget to have fun and you forget
Yes.
yourself when you've had trauma. What makes you tick? What do you enjoy? Do you enjoy music? Do you enjoy colouring? What can you do with your child that
Yeah.
will help build that connection? Going for a walk outside, getting in the fresh air, getting on your bikes together. All this is going to help as well have a knock-on effect
Absolutely.
of healing trauma.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Were you going to say something?
No, I'm going to let you carry on because you know I like to
No,
gab.
no, we both like to talk about this a lot. So absolutely joyful moments, and children are joyful beings, when they're not in that fight or flight response, trauma response. Children are, they come with the innate ability to be joyful beings. You'll see a baby with the wrapping paper after Christmas, there is so much joy in it, so
Playfulness. Yeah, playfulness.
playfulness, exactly. Let your hair down a little bit. We don't have to be just have fun with children, have a laugh with children, treat them as equals. Obviously, we have to be mindful of our language and adult appropriate, child appropriate conversations, but at the same time, treat them as
Exactly.
equals. So squeeze that in. But when you are in that moment where the children are not regulated, they've gone into that dysregulation, so angry or reactive, there are simple things you can do. If they're younger children, give them a bubble stick, blow bubbles. That what it does is
Regulate.
breathing. It regulates through the parasympathetic nervous system, calms down, kicks in, it calms you down. So little things, because every child is very different. Some children don't like to do the whole breathing thing, but some children, if you actually teach them, you can see the children amongst children, they go, hello, you breathe, you're angry, you breathe. You can actually, children are fantastic at helping each other in these
I
situations,
agree. And
trust them.
definitely, you can follow the lead. And, for regulation as well, just getting in, they call it proprioception. So it's
Yeah,
your joints and your limbs and your body that
yeah,
you need to get moving again. You need
yeah,
deep pressure, pulling, pushing. And you can do that by getting them doing frog jumps on the floor,
yeah.
pretending
Yes.
to be a bear
Yeah,
crawling,
yeah,
wheelbarrow races. All this is going to help regulate that
absolutely.
nervous system. But I did want to just mention one thing. If you are at crisis point
Yeah,
where they have absolutely lost it, you think no matter what I'm going to do here, they have just gone.
yeah,
No matter how much that you talk at that time, they are not listening. It is shut off. That front part of the brain, they cannot hear what
yeah,
you're saying. They need you present.
yeah.
And there's a technique, and it's called the A&E of behaviour management, and it's change your face, change your space, and change your pace. And what I mean by that is calming everything down, so you've got a natural facial expression. If the child can't cope with you too close to them, you know, try and just move away, move down a little bit, lower your body language, because we interpret so much, not through the words that we're saying, through our body language. And just softening that, having a window open to get some fresh air in, and slowing down your talking, not saying much, even just saying breathe, you're safe, can make such a difference, because children will go up, but they will come down if you're calm. If you're not calm, and you can feel it, so when you feel it in your body and you're not calm yourself, it's going to help you regulate by coming in, slowing yourself down, you know, thinking, Matt, I can just do a neutral facial expression, take some deep breaths myself. It will just calm you down and naturally bring them down.
Absolutely. Silence is one of the most powerful ways of connecting with your children. You can't reason, so stay silent, like you said. But it's not the passive aggressive silence. Oh, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. You're leaving.
Yeah, because we can
it's
tell.
not that. So know the difference between presence and being silent, as opposed to the passive aggressive. I don't want to talk to you anymore. You've gone off the rail. You know, it's not that. It's about,
you might
like you
feel
said,
that way. You might feel that.
You might feel that way, but you can't project it.
You do trigger you, and you do get to points where you think, "Gosh, I've had enough," and that is human. That's normal.
That's human, yeah.
And do you know, if you get it wrong, I always say to even the carers that I work with, and you can do this as a parent, you can go back and repair. So if you do lose your temper a little bit, or you think, oh, I handled that really bad, stop beating yourself up. You're human. You can go back and you can say, do you know what? I'm really sorry that I didn't speak to you calmly then, or I didn't sit and listen to what you were saying, but I really care for you and I'm here now. And because that repair is so important. And the training that I've been trained in is called PACE, and dyadic developmental psychotherapy and attachment therapy, attachment work. And if you do want to learn a little bit more about these theories, I put together, it's a free website. You can just go on, have a read and learn. And some of the things that we've discussed, you know, is on there, and it's, I'm hoping that you'll put the link in.
I will put the link in. I will share all the information. I was just going to say, I highly recommend that. I highly recommend that website. It's got really important information on that website, free access, so you can just go and access all the information for free. Or is there a donation button as well, Lisa?
Yeah, it's just to help, you know, to keep that support for the site running. But I would rather you go on and get the information. My aim really is to support people. And there's also a really, really good website called Beacon House as well, and that talks about developmental trauma. But what I do like is that some of the resources is that the fight, flight and freeze, you start to see that with your child, you know, what state are they in, what's happening, and then you start learning the grounding activities that helps that. So for like the flight response, having more grounding activities, you know, when they're at home, you've got like your big throws and you know, a hot chocolate and you know, things that activities that's going to help them ground and feel safer in the bodies. And you know, for ones that they love to run, you know, get them running outside, get them on a bike, you know, it's going to help them so much with the regulation.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know your children, and if you do, you know your children. I think best way to do is to pay attention to who your children are. Everybody is very different in the way that they do things. Like, I mean, I help my daughter with EFT tapping, and sometimes there are moments like, I don't want to tap, mummy. I don't want to tap mommy. Or she doesn't necessarily say it that like you when you're tapping. You know,
You go on a lead a bit,
la,
don't you? So
la.
they will let you know if
They will
something's
let you
too
know.
much,
And
isn't it?
yeah, in that moment, try not to be insistent on one thing. And
Yeah,
it's
I
about
agree.
then you figuring out what would help, because they know if you can ask that question, what would help you, that means you're putting that in a way ownership, and they're also making them understand their own body,
I
so that
agree.
you're not making your children dependent on you, you're making children independent in regulating themselves. So when they have that awareness within the body, you know, and they have the emotional language as well, so they can come and say to you, I'm lonely, or I'm feeling so angry, I'm feeling a bit worried right now. And then if they've actually learned to calm themselves or regulate themselves on their own, they'll go off and do things that helps them, you know. And
Definitely.
just make these resources available at home, make drawing available, make bubbles available, make squidgy things available. So make it available for children as well, so they know they can go and access them. Nothing beats the connection you have with your
I agree.
children. They will only go away and do that if they feel secure in that connection. Otherwise, they'll manifest that feeling of not feeling safe in a clingy behavior. So they'll keep coming to you. So it's just all about, it brings us back to what we started talking about, that is having that connection, you know, help
Yeah.
your children regulate, and then have that connection, you know, relate to them, and then only you can relate, reason. So three things that you can remember, and access Lisa's website as well. And as an adult in your children's life, it's so important that you work with your own triggers and you work with your own belief system as well. Because unless you commit to that, all the information in the world will go over your head, because we're all very cognitive in the head beings. We tend to live in our heads a lot. And we gather information, we use it all, we store it in our brain. You know it all. I have no doubt most of you know it all. But what trips us all is that moment, because we're triggered, they're triggered,
Yeah.
right? And we don't know how to bring ourselves down because we are trapped in our own beliefs. And that's why it's important that you commit as adults to work in your own belief system and know how to regulate, knowing self-awareness, what triggers you, what kind of conversations. I work with narcissistic abuse survivors, and one thing that triggers these people is the aggressive tantrumy behavior of children,
Mm.
right? They're not necessarily aware why it's happening, but why it's happening is narcissistic folks are very much like that. They're dysregulated, they're very rigid, you can't reason with them. So people are often triggered in
Yeah.
that.
Because of what
So you need to,
experiences they've had.
it's the
Yeah.
experience, the fight or flight experience. So you need to have that awareness. Lisa, I think if you haven't got anything else to say, I mean, we've got so much to say.
I know, and I just hope it's been really useful. And
Yeah,
as adults, I would really, really recommend that when you feel triggered, you start to do some work around
yeah,
what helps you personally using your senses. Like for me, I know I need to go and have a hot drink if I'm
yeah,
feeling quite anxious, or, a shower helps, or different
yes,
types of music. And there's so many good grounding techniques and regulation strategies that you can try, and it's going to help you get in a better space for
yes,
dealing with your child, and
absolutely,
building that
absolutely,
connection. So thank you for
absolutely.
having me.
The best therapy for a child is your connection
I
with
agree.
your children. So, with that, I think we're going to finish this conversation. Thank you all for watching. I will post the links for Lisa's website where you can access all the information. And if you would like to get in touch with me with to seek support for narcissistic abuse and co-parenting support with a narcissistic partner, there is a workshop that's happening next Wednesday. That is on the 7th of December at 12 o'clock. I can post the link as well with this video. So get in touch with me. Take care all, and Thank you very much, Lisa. If you
Thank
just stay.